Alvin, what did you do? Which part did you do? What the assignments which I gave?
Sir, I tried to look at Maya and Advaita.
Okay.
From Advaita, I got that soul was no different from Brahman. And
What was that? What was that? Advaita, come again.
It was said by, I think, Sri Adi Shankaracharya.
Okay.
Said that soul was not different from Brahman.
Okay.
And Maya means illusion.
Okay. Did you understand the words called Atman and Brahman?
Brahman, I think, is a god.
Yeah, no problem. Like, no need to by heart. I just asked. Like, when you understand something, so that's called not. You understood well, or like it was half.
No.
It's a bit tough subject. It's bit tough. Okay, that's what is called non-dualism. Advaita. Dvaita means two in Sanskrit. Advaita means it's not two. As you said, soul and body are same. It's a same concept which we told the other day. What Plato was telling. Okay, right. Moving on. Aditya, which assignment you attempted?
The European Renaissance.
European Renaissance. What did you find out?
Like it happened after the plague, when the political and everything was down. It was like a rebirth where everything just went up. Like art, culture, economic, everything it became a rebirth for that time in the Middle Ages.
Okay. Right. And before that, like before the Renaissance, Europe had something called a Dark Age.
The bubonic plague.
Yeah, so that makes it even profound, right? Okay, fine. Hilal, everyone else, you can turn on your videos. Everyone else, please turn on your videos. Yeah, Hilal, which one? Hilal, I am making you the co-host. Okay, I am making you and Leon the co-host, so that in case I crash out because of some reason, you can manage the show for some time till I come back. Okay, you can admit others. Yeah, Hilal, tell me.
Like the Dark Age was also known as the Black Death, because I'm talking about the European Renaissance. The era is often branded as a time of war, ignorance, famine, and pandemic, such as the Black Death. Like, I got a point, so I wrote it down.
Okay, but did you understand it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we have to slowly move to this habit of understanding the things and telling that. Okay, so the era of reading something, writing something, and reading that, we have to come out from that. So even if you are half right, even if you understand only partially, it is fine. But start understanding the things and telling that. Okay, so you have to slowly move out from the habit of by hearting things. Okay, so if you tell Renaissance, you should ask why it happened, how did it happen, who all were behind it, what were the impacts of that on society, before Renaissance what, after Renaissance what. You may be able to understand only very partial things of it, which is fine. There could be movies out of it, there could be novels which are very good to see, watch and all, but you should understand it. Don't go for like, and I gave you assignment, so you write from somewhere and come and read. So you are getting to 11th and all, you have to slowly move out from that habit. Okay, so that mug up learning, you have to slowly tell by. So that is the point, which is what I am trying to drive in. Okay, fine, right. So let me start. So we, in the last class, we stopped at this slide. Okay, so I told you this is about, so this was like, as I mentioned, Raphael's painting. And I also mentioned about the Plato and Aristotle. So if you see, like, have you heard this word called platonic love? Any of you? Have you heard of this word called platonic love? No, very bad. Anything related to love at this age, you should know. Anyone have heard platonic love? You can type. Oh, nobody. Okay. So platonic love means divine love. Love which is not just based on physical contact and physical intimacy. It is a love between hearts, That's why we use the word called platonic love. So that actually comes from Plato. He thought about something ideal, something divine kind of stuff. Okay. So now when it comes to Aristotle, like one of the major theory which he put forward was about motion. Okay. So the motion theory of Aristotle was that he told if anything has to move, there has to be a force. Okay. When you apply a force is when something moves. How many of you agree with it? How many of you disagrees with it? Very simple theory. He told if anything has to move, there has to be a force. That's what he told when you put soil or water, there is a force of the earth. That is why it is coming down. And there's a force of the heavens or sky. That is why fire and air are going up. So when there's a force is when something moves. Like if a stone moves or anything, that means there's a force behind it. How many of you agrees with it? First, let me ask. How many of you agrees with it? Alvin agrees. Aditya agrees. Suman agrees. Okay. So let me ask, is there anybody who disagrees with it? Okay, fine. Axel Johnson, if the object is at rest, force is necessary. Let us assume if object is not at rest. Anything that moves, that means there is a force behind it. Dennis, you want to talk something? Raise the hand. No. Okay. So anybody who disagrees with it? Anybody who disagrees with Aristotle? That a force is not required for something to move. Anyone? Okay. So guys, I can tell you are royally wrong. Okay. That also means that you haven't understood Newton. Okay. That also means that you haven't understood motion. Okay. Not to discredit you, but we have to get into that. Okay. So the fundamental reason why they thought Earth is at the center of the universe was this. They thought like if anything has to move, you need a force. So which force is pushing Earth? There is no force. That is why Earth is stationary. That was their theory. And it is not, Aristotle was not the first guy to tell, but he was the first guy who gave a very good backing to that theory with some kind of explanations. Okay. Yeah, so Axel told if it is in motion, we don't need force. Okay, so at least one person is having some understanding of motion. Okay, so this is what you understand is the most important false understanding in science history, which took around 1600 years to correct, and it took so much of time because a person, a giant and intellect and a great person like Aristotle is telling that. So when a person like Aristotle puts a theory, it is very difficult for somebody else to come and counter that unless they have very good conviction. Okay, so this was the center of the theory that if Earth is to move, somebody has to push Earth, right? And nobody is there to push Earth. There's no force. And if something has to move, if Earth was moving, that means there should have been a force. There is no force. We would have known it if there is a force. Okay, so that is the basic, right? We will move on, and I would like you to keep this question and answer and thinking about it. In the future classes, we'll come back to that, right? So let us go back to our slide, and now let us see what happened after this. After Aristotle telling this, then what happened? See, then there is a guy called Ptolemy. Who came and put together all those understanding, whatever they had during those times. So they put together all these understandings, and they told that this is the model of the universe, and they call it as Ptolemaic universe. That is because after the name of this person called Ptolemy. Okay, so if you look at it, I had told in the previous class also about parallax. About that, this very simple thing that if Earth was moving, we would have known it. We are not able to see that. All those things. Okay. So this was Ptolemaic universe. But then it is not that simple to put a universe. there were some more challenges. The challenges were, this is like this. You know, I don't know whether you have observed, like if you are going in a car, and if another car, if you're overtaking another car, from your car, you will feel like the other car is going backwards. Even if you're going in a bus or a train, you will feel the people who are standing in the trees which are there are going backwards. So that's an illusionary effect which you have. That's a relative motion effect which you have. So similarly, we know like this is not right. We know the sun is at the center, earth is moving. We knew it much later. But when the earth moves, the other planets like Saturn, Jupiter and all, when the earth overtakes them, it is like how two cars are moving. And our car is overtaking Saturn. And when we look at it, we will feel like Saturn is going backwards. You know? And that is something called retrograde. That theory is called retrograde. So like to put the thing in perspective, when earth is moving like this, Saturn is also moving like this, but earth is moving faster than Saturn or faster than Jupiter. So when we look from here, we feel at some points when we overtake Saturn, Saturn is going backwards. Actually, it is not going backwards, but it's a feeling which we have. But then when you look from earth, they wanted to count for that. How is it happening? So this gentleman called Ptolemy, he brought a theoretical explanation. He told all this Saturn and everything, they have a motion like this. You know, they move around their epicenter, a movement like this, and then they are moving like this also, like how earth moves. Earth moves on its axis and also around the sun. Similarly, there are two motions for all these planets. Then there is another question, like we know that there is a climatic change. We know the distance between two seasons is different. That is basically because of the shape of our orbit and also because of the axis, earth axis and all those things. But they did not know all those things at that point. So they brought to adjust to that system. They told earth is not exactly at the center. For different planets, the center can change. So the gist of the story is the Ptolemaic universe was a very good approximation based on the theory what Aristotle put together based on whatever theories which was built till his time. And as per that theory, earth was at the center of the universe, and they accounted for all other abnormalities, whatever you can see, using some kind of theories like this. So this is what they call as Ptolemaic universe. Okay, if you just go to YouTube and just try some video, they can see some videographic representation of how it looked. Right, okay. So now, further from here, then what happened? This is somewhere in 2nd century AD. You understand? This is somewhere in 2nd century AD. AD means what we call as current era now. And after that, how did it move from geocentric to heliocentric? So geocentric means geo is earth. Geocentric means earth-centric, which is what Aristotle believed in, which is what Ptolemy believed in. From that, how to move to heliocentric. Heliocentric means sun is at the center. Right. So how did it happen? Okay. So now, let me ask you that question. So we told about Greek science, a lot of people during Greek civilization. And when they stopped, like there was because of some political instability, that is up to around 2nd century, 3rd century AD. After that, the Greek Empire, after the Alexander times and all those things, the Greek Empire withered away. That's a different story altogether. But you know, if science has to progress and all, you should have stability in the country. You should have peaceful atmosphere. Otherwise, it can't progress. Okay. So then, do you have any idea? After Greek civilization, after Greek science, who else contributed much? Like everybody has contributed something. Do you think, do you understand which all parts of the world the science progressed after that? And we know whatever we are talking about Copernicus and all those things, like is much later, 15th century, 16th century and all. So do you have any idea in which part of the world science progressed after that? You can message. And we knew like Europe had a very tough time after the 2nd century AD and all till around 13th, 14th century, Europe had a very tough time. That's why we call as Dark Age of Europe, right? There are some counter arguments for that now, but which is more political and religious. So let us not get into that. Okay. So anyone want to answer like which all countries, which all part of the world you felt science progress after that, from around 2nd century AD to till 15th century, 16th century? When Europe was under dark, where else we saw some flowers, some fruits? Suman told India. India had really pretty good scientific contribution at that point. We will come to that. Where else? Where else? Arab countries, yes. Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, fine. Excellent. Okay, very good. So that is what I want to tell you. When we hear about Iraq, Syria and all, we will feel this is some third world countries where, you know, everything, only bombs and all those are getting produced, which is the state today. So you have to understand that few centuries back, that was not the case. Few centuries back, the today's Scandinavian countries, how we look at them, how we look at Americas and all, people used to look at Iraq, Syria, that belt, the Arab belt, with that kind of, you know, that kind of a passion. Okay. So now, if I go back, I will just give some developments which happened at that point. So as you told, one of the place where really a lot of contribution to science happened was India. And even from India, even before that, even during this Greek times also, there were points of elegance, like, you know, like Sushruta, Charaka and all, you know, they came up with some medicinal progress and all. There are books written by them. So all those things, there were like points of contribution. But a major contribution came from a gentleman called Aryabhatta. Okay. So, and if you want to comment, what was the contribution of Aryabhatta? You can message. Have you heard of Aryabhatta? What was his contribution, apart from what I have written? You can message. One thing is like, he's, yes, 0. Okay. So, okay. So this is, I think, sometimes what happens is the hype becomes more, you know. We all like to get stories. So everybody tells Aryabhatta found out 0 kind of stuff. Like, you can't tell that. Like, people before that also had some understanding about 0 and all. Somebody told astronomy, which is very good. Okay. So one of the major contribution of Aryabhatta was, he's a person who proposed this Earth has an axis. Earth has an axis which is tilted by X degrees. Okay. And that is a very major contribution. In fact, that is the one which actually explains the climatic changes and why some hemisphere are getting more sunlight during some time and all. That is a very major contribution. Okay. And now there's a big debate going on, very big debate going on in the scientific world on Aryabhatta's contribution towards invention of calculus. Calculus is a mathematical branch which deals with differential equations, integration and all those things, and which is normally credited with 2 people called Leibniz and Newton. Okay, there's a very ugly fight which had happened between Newton and Leibniz, and they are actually normally credited with the progress in this. But there is a big claim by a section of people that Aryabhatta had some contribution to that in the early stages. And it's a fact that a lot of people used to come for trade to India during that time. And there are proofs, documentary evidences that many of the knowledge from India many of the books from India, it has been translated in the Arabic world. And many of the books from the Arabic world got translated into Latin, and that has paved a way for European Renaissance. It has given a good contribution. You can't tell it is the only thing. European Renaissance has its own reason, but this was a big contribution. So Aryabhatta actually has a very big achievement to him. He derived the circumference of Earth, and we don't know how he did it. After some time, we will find out another person who did something. But Aryabhatta found out the circumference of Earth in a very accurate value. He brought it to a very accurate value. Still, there are a lot of speculations on how he did that. Okay, and then I don't know whether you have heard about this person called Brahmagupta. So Aryabhatta had a very famous book called Aryabhatiya, which all were like got translated. And Brahmagupta had a very famous book which got translated into Arabic, and that actually the Arabic travelers, they used to come to India and all. They have like written. They have something called Indionomy. The Indology, the branch which studies about the India, the contributions of India, knowledge from India and all. So what you understand from in India, this gets developed from the knowledge what we receive from other places, from people who come from trading. So this is what you understand when you understand science. It is not like somebody have developed the entire science. It is not that in one specific country or one specific region this happens. It is the result of lot of borrowings and givings, credits and debits. It comes from one place to another place. From there it goes to this place. That is how it gets developed, right? Anybody know what is Indo-Arabic number system? Any of you know what is Indo-Arabic number system? What number system you follow now? Whatever you study in the school. What is it called?
Indo-Arabic number system.
What does it mean? Indo-Arabic number system means what are the other systems which were there before? Any idea?
Roman.
Yeah, okay, Roman. Okay, they used to use something called hexadecimal then. Hexadecimal. Yeah, Roman numerals. Okay. Hexadecimal means 1 to 16. Europe was using that. I don't think Renaissance would have happened if they would not have switched to Indo-Arabic number system. The Indo-Arabic number system, the beauty of that is if you tell 568, 5 means hundreds, 6 means tens, 8 means ones. In a 16 system, hexadecimal system, it is so very complex. And Sumerians used to use a system called 60. They used to have a base 60. What we use, the Indo-Arabic is called base 10, what we use. Sumerians used to use something called base 60. The clay tablets actually have a system called base 60. And even now we are continuing some part of base 60. Any idea? There are some places we still use base 60.
Abacus.
Anybody? Yeah?
Abacus.
I could not get.
Abacus.
Louder. Abacus. Abacus is a method of study. We use every day a 60 base system.
Clock.
Yeah. The clock, we still use the Sumerian system. And they had their own reasons for using 60 base system. You see? 60 is divisible by 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, lot of things, 30, 26. So they used to have that system. And there's another very important thing where we use 60 base system. They use the angle of a circle, 60 into 6, 360. It's actually their system. So from India, we have this numeral system where all these people have contributed, Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta and all. And from there it went to Arabic and they enriched further from there. And then from there it went to Europe. That is documented proof. But the other calculus part, it is not a documented proof. These all are discussions which are still happening. Now, if you go back, there's a person, I don't know, you might have heard this person called Varahamihira. Okay, Varahamihira is a very famous person. He's one of the Navaratna, I think. Varahamihira. He had a lot of contributions in optics, algebra, and all those things. And some of the kings during the Mauryan Empire and all, they had this concept of having these people, whomever we are telling, these scientists and philosophers and all, they all used to be part of the king's dais. Okay, Navaratna and all those things, which means the knowledge used to be regarded in much high esteem at that time. Not all the time, sometime. Okay, right. Another famous scientist is Bhaskara. Bhaskara, there is 1 and 2. He also did a lot of contribution, astronomy, calculus and all. Lalla. And how many of you know that Kerala was an epicenter of mathematics? Have you heard? Anybody? Anybody knows Kerala mathematicians? Any names? Okay. Any names? Any scientists? Madhava. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So now it's a very recent story, like Kerala School of Mathematics. Story is old, but we were not knowing this. We were not knowing this as a gentleman called Madhava Sangamagrama. Sangamagrama is a place called Kudal Manikyam in today, which is near Iringalakuda. So I would strongly encourage you, if you are going home next time, to visit a temple and Madhava's place, birth home and all those things. So Madhava is credited with finding the accurate value of pi. But the unfortunate thing is that those times, as I told, in some kings' times, knowledge used to get regarded, and some other time they were living under penury. So Madhava, I think they did not even have papers and systems to write all those things. Like, they would have be going in the morning and, thinking about something and writing something. And their parents would have told, and society would have told, this guy is useless. See, all other people are working and making some money. He is writing some theorem, some maths, good for nothing. Against all those things, they would have had to fight. And, they did not even have money to write and keep. So Madhava had not kept many of his writings. And some of the things has come from his disciples. And an interesting thing which happened sometime recently is that he has been credited with the mathematics. There is something called power series, and which was credited to a European gentleman called Grigori. And now that has been found out. It has been established that around 250 years before Grigori, it was found out by Madhava. And now that is renamed as Madhava Grigori series. Okay. So you have to understand. So Kerala had a very rich tradition of mathematics. And a professor called Mr. G. Varghese, he wrote a book on that. And that became a very big topic of discussion called Kerala School of Mathematics. And there is a gentleman called Somayaji, Melpathur, Bhattathiri, Achyutan Nambudiri, a lot of people who have been disciples of that. But even in today, I don't know how many Keralites know this. Now, the reason why I'm telling all those things about the scientific contributions of India had a very rich legacy of science. But Indian science is not the head of Ganapati being replaced, and that is the proof of head transplant, or Gantari having 100 kids and that is a proof of cloning. So those all comedies are not actually Indian science. So those are their people to discredit India, I would tell. The real Indian science is this. We have a very rich legacy of science. If somebody tells that Gomutra can cure everything, that is India's contribution. So there are people to discredit India. So if you want to credit India, talk about Aryabhatta, talk about Brahmagupta, talk about earth axis, talk about Madhava Sangamagrama. There are enough things. Okay. So if at all we are sitting here and learning this, that is because of contributions of people like these whomever we have listed. So now let us move back to another place which has been again been a subject of ridicule in recent history. So this is the house of Madhava called Iringatappalli Mana near Kudal Manikyam. Okay, so this was Madhava's Infinite series. You can see in a BBC documentary. If you just go to YouTube, you can, if you just type a BBC maths documentary and Madhava, you can see a small stretch in that. Like how Madhava, going in the backwaters, using that, how did he find out the accurate value of pi? And in the process, he invented a series. Like, I will not get into the depth of it. This is another subject by its own. Like, he goes to 4, he understands that, no, this is more than 4. And then from the 4, he removes 4/3, so he comes here. Then he knows that, no, this is lesser than pi. Then he increases by 4/5, then he comes here. Then he reduces, increases, reduces, increases. With this series, it gives the accurate value of pi. And this was the most accurate value of pi which was found at that point. And in the process, he found out a series. Okay? Right. Next place. So I want all of you to read this poster. I hope you can read this. Leon, you can read this, right?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. See, ink of a scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr. This is straight from the lion's mouth, Prophet Muhammad. Straight from the lion's mouth. Okay? If anybody else had thought it is otherwise. See the importance he gave to knowledge. As a result, the largest Islamic empire, the most profound Islamic empire, Abbasid Caliphate, we had a scientific revolution of sorts, and there was a very famous king called Harun al-Rashid and his son al-Mamun. During their times, it is the first instance of government-sponsored research, like government spending money on research. And then he set up a school, a center to translate books from Greek, from Indian, from Persian, all the scientific books. Okay, and then whatever we can call as one of the earliest instances, even in India at that time, even Greek time, they had like schools, universities and all. And the answer in this period was something called Bayt al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom. And you know, see the year. At the year of 830, they established this for research in science. Okay, so that was the farsightedness of those kings. See, Al-Azhar University in Cairo came in 970, and the next university, Al-Nizamiya. See, they were focused so much in science to the extent that almost every science which we study today, almost every science, the foundation of that came from this Arab civilization. Okay, look at the names, and this mostly happened during this time period, around 4.5 centuries. So we consider Al-Khwarizmi as the father of algebra. So actually, lot of algebraic contributions have happened from India before it is from Greek science, but Al-Khwarizmi built upon that, and he developed like whatever we call as an equation, two sides of equation, or the foundational algebraic stuff has been built by him. And a gentleman called Alhazen, actually his name is Ibn al-Haytham, but then the Europeans and English people had issues in pronouncing, they call him Alhazen. He is called father of optics. And the first camera we call Obscura, had been made by him. I think 2015 was 1,000 years of that camera. The world celebrated 1,000 years of light. Okay, it is two meanings. Like he was spreading light in a world which is otherwise dark. And Alhazen has been called the first scientist, experimental scientist. It is not a scientist who had not there before. He's been called first experimental scientist. So we have to take a pause at that point and tell, till Alhazen's time, people believed that we can see some things because light goes from our eyes. When we look at a star, we are able to see the star because light goes from our eyes. Okay? How many of you agree with this? You are able to see something. You look at a star, you are able to see the star because light goes from your eyes. How many of you agrees with this? How many of you? Aditya disagrees. How many of you agree or disagree? Disagree. Okay, you tell me how does it happen then? How are you able to see something? Where from the light comes? Okay, disagree. Where from light comes? How are you able to see something? It reflects and refracts and comes into the eye. Okay, right. Okay. So if you see a star, how are you able to see a star? It reflects from where? Light comes from where? Light comes from the surroundings and comes to the eye from the sun. Okay, star is a source of light. Okay, more answers? Okay, a part of everything is true. Like in our solar system, sun is the source of the light, and there are hundreds and thousands of suns in other galaxies and other systems. Even in our galaxy, there are more suns. So the light from the light source, of which we call as in our solar system sun, the light comes and comes into another object. So if I have to see, let us assume Abel now, there has to be a phase there has to be a phase of Abel where sunlight falls. Okay, so this, if we look at today, it looks so simple. What is the big deal in this? But then, most important things don't look that simple. So they thought when you look at something, the light is going from our eyes to the star. That is how we are able to see the stars. And it was Alhazen. He did very simple 2 experiments. Very simple experiment. He made a small light, okay, and made a dark room, okay, and kept an object there. And he lit this light, and with this light, after putting the light, he is able to see the object. He removed the light. He can't see the object. Okay, if the light rays were going from your eyes, you should have been able to see the object without the light source also. And that is supposed to be one of the most important experiments. I want you to take this as an assignment. Go and search Alhazen's experiment of optic. Alhazen or Ibn al-Haytham. Okay, I'm typing it here. Alhazen's optics experiments. And you see a big difference. Socrates told we can sit and think and find out how the universe is functioning. Plato told there is an ideal universe. Our duty is to find out the geometry of that. Aristotle told we have to observe what is happening in this world and find out how the universe is functioning. When it came to Ibn al-Haytham or Alhazen, he told we can't find out many things just by observation. We have to conduct experiments to find out what is happening. See, that is the flaw of science. That is why Ibn al-Haytham is called one of the first experimental scientists. And then many people credit that with Galileo, because he is the person who actually put a process towards experience. He the person probably done that much kind of experiments in that era. But then this gentleman started it off. Okay, so I think 2015 was the 1000 years of light, and we celebrated that. Okay, and you can even go and type something called obscura, camera obscura. That is another thing probably you can do. Camera obscura. So next assignment for you. Search camera obscura, understand how it was working, and then understand how are today's cameras working. Right? How an image of an object is coming probably in our screen. What is the process? How does it work? Which all processes it goes through. Okay, fine. Moving on. Another person called Jabir ibn Hayyan. You see, he was father of alchemy. I can tell you, you see, whatever this al name is there, which all things this al name is there, almost all of them are inventions from the Arabic scientists. Algebra, alchemy, algorithm, almost all als. Okay, even you can see the names of many places in your place Kuwait will have this al. Okay. And this gentleman called Al-Kashi built a mechanical planetary computer at that time to see how are the planets moving. At any point of time, if you go and look at that computer, even the Greek time, they had developed a computer like that. So you can go to that computer and see which are the positions of different planets and all. You see how advanced they were. And on the medicinal side, a gentleman called Ibn Sina. Okay. And then a person called Al-Biruni. He's a person, he did a lot of study on Indian contributions and also ontology. I think he translated Brahmagupta's book. Okay. And this gentleman, now you see here, he actually questioned Ptolemy's model. He told, this doesn't seem to be right, that Earth is at the center of the universe. It doesn't look to be right. Probably Earth might be rotating. He could not come with a concrete theory, but he brought up. And then another gentleman called Al-Battani, he actually made astronomical tables to justify this, which actually were used by Copernicus also. Later there were evidences emerged. See how the knowledge flows? Knowledge flows from the caveman to to different countries. From there it goes to other countries. So if anybody comes and claims I built science or my country built science or this one scientist did invent this stuff, it is not entirely true. It cannot be entirely true. Okay. So now I will tell you something called this gentleman called Al-Biruni. Okay, these were some of the astronomical observations of him, and he made an attempt to measure diameter of Earth. Okay, look at this. And before him, there was a Greek guy called Aristophanes who actually did another experiment. Very crude methods, very crude measurement, but you see how they think. This was somewhere in year 1000 or so, around 1000 years before us. You see how they think. So this gentleman called Al-Biruni, what he did, he identified an area where it is, I think it is somewhere closer to our today's Pakistan, which had a very vast lawn so that, and a very nearby mountain. I think he searched for that place. And on the top of from the top of the mountain, he can see that lawn like a horizon. How you see when you look at an ocean, how you can see the horizon. Why are they looking at horizon? He wants that to be the tipping point. From that, another tipping point of Earth's curvature. So he climbed on a mountain, stood here, and they had at that time the angle measurement was a technique which I think even Greek times they knew. Like how to measure the angle of any place by looking at the horizon. So this was a technique they had before also. Okay, so he measured the angle, this angle, whatever you see as alpha here. Okay, and from this he calculated what is the diameter of Earth. I'll give you 3 minutes. 1000 years later, today, I'll give 3 minutes. How can you get the diameter? If you get the radius, actually you can find the diameter. How can you get the diameter of Earth from this measurement of this angle? And obviously the height of the mountain, we will come to that later. You assume that he knew the height of the mountain. There is no method to directly measure the height of the mountain because you can't dig a hole here. He developed another method for that, but you just assume that he knew the height of this mountain. He knew this angle. Okay, how can you find the radius of the Earth from this? Take your books, 3 minutes. If you are not clear, you can ask. If it is not clear to you, you can ask. But you would understand 1000 years back, he not just did the experiment, he found it out. A very simple mathematics. Sir, can you repeat? Dennis. Okay. Using trigonometry, you find out using trigonometry. You are right, Hexajoman. You find out using trigonometry. How can you? Okay. So somebody asked me to repeat. Let me repeat. Story is okay. The interesting story. One of the reason why the Arab scientists were trying to find out the diameter of Earth is the Islamic Empire was growing at that time, and the farther they go from the main mosque in Mecca, they have you have to look at the mosque in Mecca and then pray 5 times a day. But how do you know the direction? So they want to have an idea of curvature of Earth. That was actually their motivation to find out the diameter of Earth, and many of the inventions happened because of this need. So this gentleman called Al-Biruni, he identified a place. Actually, he searched a lot for that place. He identified a place where there's a mountain which is reasonably tall, and from the top of the mountain next to that is a very plain lawn, so that you can see the horizon. Horizon means like if you go to an ocean, you can see like the boats are tipping and moving away. That means how are boats moving away? If the boat comes to this point, you can see from here. That is what is called horizon. So you can see the horizon, and from here they had like instruments at that time to measure angle. It's an old technology. So he measured this angle, and he measured the height of the mountain through an indirect method. We will come to that later. So this h, the height of this mountain, you knew the angle. How can you find the radius of Earth?
Sir, the angle CO is alpha.
Angle CO is alpha. Good. Angle CO means angle COB, right? Okay. Good.
Yes, yes.
Okay, he is right. See, this angle is alpha, right? If this is alpha, see, alpha you have to understand just denote. You can use A, X, B, any name. See, if this is alpha, this is also alpha. Why it is so? This is one line. This line is perpendicular to this line. This is one line. This is another line. And these two lines are making this angle. And this line is perpendicular to this line. And this line is perpendicular to other line. So obviously this angle has to be alpha. In other methods, if this is alpha, then this angle CAB is 90 minus alpha. If this is 90 minus alpha, this has to be alpha. That is obvious, right? Okay, somebody is asking something. Okay, Aditya. Okay. Two people have come. Cos A is R by R plus H, right? Okay. How do you get that? You just see everybody. They have written cos A. You can come and write in this slide. Aditya or Sajoman, you can come and write in this slide so that let everybody see that. Okay, so who wrote this? Cos alpha is R by R plus H. And this is a basic stuff of cosine, right? This is, if this angle is alpha, let us assume this is earth radius is R, this one ABO or AO is R plus H. If this is R, this is H, then this distance AO is R plus H. So R plus H cos alpha is R. From where you remove this in here, so you get this, right? Yeah. Okay. From this you resolve. Take this R plus H to the other side. From this it is pretty simple, right? Come on. Okay. See, from this it is very simple. You take the R plus H to the other side. That means R plus H cos alpha is R. Bring the R to one side and find out the R. Should I do it or you will do it? See, look at this. He has brought up to here. What does it mean? That means R plus H into cos A, cos X. I am using X, to write it easily, is equal to R. Is this not clear? This is actually, basically you get it from this diagram itself. R plus H into cos alpha is R. This is coming from this one. Okay? Right. So now, if you expand, what happens? R cos X plus H cos X is equal to R. Very simple. You just expanded this bracket, right? Now you bring all the R to one side, right? So take this R cos X to other side. So what will you get? H cos X is equal to R minus R cos X, right? What did you do? You just took this R cos X to the other side, right? Which is equal to what? If you take the R out, it is R into 1 minus cos X, right? So what is R? R is equal to H cos X, right, divided by 1 minus cos X. You know H, you know X, so that you know cos X value. You find out earth radius. You find out earth radius to the tune of, I think, some 30-40 kilometer difference. If you want to take a screenshot, you can take. This is simple mathematics here for you guys in 11th, it's not a big deal at all. The big deal is to have this idea that I can measure the radius of Earth. Big deal is not this. This is the simple trigonometry. There is for somebody to think like this, that if I climb on a mountain and look at a horizon, I can measure the angle. If I measure the angle, from there I can find out the diameter of Earth. That is the big idea. Yeah? Anybody has any doubt? If you don't have any doubt, I'm going to give an assignment, next assignment to you. He found out the height of this mountain through another mathematical method like this. Because you can't measure the height of the mountain, right? Because you can't dig a hole from the top of the mountain. So he found out the height of it using another mathematical method, simple trigonometry, using a couple of measurements. Sir, how can we find the radius? Alpha they found out. Alpha, he climbed this mountain, and you know there is an instrument in different places, they call it by different name. Geno and some scope they call it some place. That is a dial kind of an instrument. I can, in the next class I will show you the picture of that. The dial kind of an instrument, they could measure the angle. Angle measurement is a very old technique. From this horizon, what is this angle? He measured. That is how he knows alpha. Okay. So is it possible to find the angle through calculation? No, yeah. Angle alpha, how can you find out through calculation? It is depending on the height of the mountain. Right? It is not possible. But how he found out the height of the mountain is, he measured. He took two measurements. Now, similarly, like how do you find this angle? You have that instrument. From here, he looked at the top of the mountain. He found out that angle like this. Like this, for probably from here, he found out what is this angle. And from another point, he again found out what is that angle. Angle 1, angle 2. Okay. And from that, this distance he knows, he found out. It's a very simple trigonometry. That is your assignment for tomorrow, for next class. Okay. So now, as we are in this subject, let me ask you a simple question. The fundamental of this one was that what is the sum of all the angles of a triangle?
180.
180. How do you get it?
Angle 1 plus angle 2 plus angle 3.
Okay. This is your whiteboard. Somebody, can you come and show how the three angles of a triangle, if you add, it gets 180. You can come and draw here. Oliver, okay. Hilal, okay. 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 Now proof, how do you get it? Okay. Okay, good. No, start from here. Okay, very good. Okay, fine, that's okay. Let it be a bit shabby, no problem. Okay. Now you proof. How do these three angles, when it adds, becomes 180? Somebody else also want to come and draw, you can draw. Okay, two people can do at same point. Then it's no problem, do it. Let Hilal take one part of the board. Dennis, you take another part of the board. Let us share the cyber world among others. Alvin, okay, draw, no problem. Prove. From Kala, they will give you a gift. Who proves it first, they will give you a gift. Either you have to give it, or Joseph sir will give it. Who proves first time the very simple thing that three angles of a triangle is 180, you will get a gift. Okay, different people. Suman is trying. Alvin, good. Okay, proof. Okay, good. Okay, A, B. Okay, good. Very good. D. Okay. Okay, come on. More than M plus more than B plus more than C is 180. How do you get that is my question. That is 180. I also know it. How are you getting it? Everybody can try, okay? All of you can try. In the board or in your book, and come and prove it here. Where have all gone? Come on. Come running. See, I want you to think such things. Okay? I want you to think why it is 180. Where from it comes. Right? See, when the major thing which you found out by looking at Al-Biruni stuff, you know what is the use of trigonometry? What is the use of this cos alpha, tan theta and all those things? This is not for fun, right? It's a very serious thing. You're finding out the diameter of Earth using that. And from there only you start everything else, right? Okay. So now let me take this gentleman's, whoever has drawn this, okay? You can just look at here. Let me take this here. Okay. So somebody has drawn this, okay? Let us assume we extend this line. Let me assume, or let me draw a new stuff here. Let me draw a new triangle here. Okay. Yes, Hilal is making something. Okay. So this is a triangle. Okay. And you call some name to these angles. Let us assume this is A. Let's assume this is this angle is B. Let us assume this angle is C. Okay. Three angles, A, B, and C. Okay. Fine. Now, what will happen if you extend this line? Let us assume you make another stuff like this. What will happen when you extend this line? When you extend this line, let us assume this is an extension. What is this angle? What is this angle? If this angle is A, this is B, this is C. What is this angle? Can you see this? What is this angle? If this is parallel to this line, what is this angle? It is A. It's as simple as that. If this is A, as somebody who has answered it, let me see. Yeah, from Asa Jomon, as he has told, this is straightforward. If this is A, this is A. This you studied. This too is A, right? Similarly, if you extend this line, right? Assume that this is extension of this. What is this angle? What is this angle? Again, it is B. Yeah, Suman has answered. Dennis has answered. That is B. It is straightforward, right? It is B.
I got the answer.
Yeah, somebody told something. Yeah, please tell me.
Sir, the one before I marked something like some alternate angles.
Yeah.
Like from that, like the can I draw some?
Yeah, please draw. No issues. Please draw.
This full angle is 180 degree because it's linear pair.
Yes.
So instead of here and here, we will substitute these two angles because it's alternate triangle.
Yes.
Then after you'll get it's 180 degree.
Okay. Same thing. Very good. So you find the alternate angle, you find out this angle, and you find out this angle, and then you add these three. Right? Yeah. Advait Saji. Somebody has raised the hand. Dennis Samuel raised the hand. You want to tell something?
So by mistake, sir.
Okay, fine. So it's same thing which he found out, right? Like this is B, and then what is this angle? What is this angle?
C.
That is C. This is so very straightforward, right? This angle is C, right? So this is A, this is B. If this is C, we all know that this angle is 180. Right? Half of a circle. So this is not a big deal, but I want you to think. Actually, in trigonometry, if you understand three things, you can derive all other equations. You don't have to by heart the entire trigonometry. If you understand 2-3 basic stuff, you can derive all the remaining stuff. Okay? Fine. Anybody wants to ask anything? Otherwise, I would like to cover one more topic. This was nothing great regarding history of science. I just want to tell you that once you learn things, don't get into the habit of by hearting things. Ask questions. Ask your teacher. Ask somebody who knows why is this happening like this. Why is cos theta is equal to this by this? Why is tan theta is equal to this? What is the reason? Okay. Once you start questioning like that, you may not be able to get the answer for everything all in a sudden. First time you may not get it, but slowly you will start getting it. Okay. Then what happens? You don't have to by heart then so many things. Okay. Fine. Let me go back to my slide. Okay. Now from here, okay, two people have raised the hand again. If you raise the hand, you can unmute and ask. Okay. You don't have to wait for permission. You can unmute. Yeah, please.
Sir, Alhazen did that experiment of the small light and dark room and the object. So what was the source of the light?
He built a candle kind of a light source.
Oh, okay.
See, the simple thing is, it is a very logical thinking. Like if the light is going from your eyes, Even if it is dark, you should be able to see that, right? Right? But something which you may feel very logical is not that logical if you don't know it. Okay. So now we get into Copernicus. Okay. So now one thing you have to understand, Copernicus has borrowed some concepts from the previous era. It is nothing wrong. Everybody has borrowed from previous people. But he came up with this explanation of parallax. We explained parallax last time, right? He told the stars are so very far away from Earth and they are so very big. So parallax is happening, but we are not able to observe it with our naked eye. Okay. And he told Earth, as you are telling, you will feel like it is stable, but it is not so. But Copernicus could not tell why you are not able to feel the movement of Earth when Earth is moving. He told Earth is moving. He did a lot of calculations. And actually, Copernicus was so scared to tell this. During those times and all, the predominant view, even the religious view, was that Earth is the center of the universe. There is a lot of faith-related reason to it. So he feared so much to tell that Earth is not the center of the universe. So much so that he kept all these findings to himself. Actually, he was a priest. And then finally, when he gave his book for publishing, the first copy came on his last day. On his day of death, actually, the book came. So when he was alive, he could not see his book being read and known by people. But he could not explain why, when the Earth is moving, we are not able to feel that movement. Like when you go in a car, when the car moves in 150 kilometers per hour, you are able to see the movement. But then if Earth is moving at much faster speed, like 30 kilometers per second, 30 kilometers per second means in 10 seconds you are out of Kuwait, right? And if 20 seconds you are into India. So that speed. But you are not able to feel that. Okay? We will come to that later, why we are not able to feel that we are coming. Anybody wants to answer that? Why we are not able to feel? If Earth is moving so fast, why we don't feel that? Even in a car, if you just lower the glass, you feel that. Anybody want to attempt? It's a very important thing. If Earth is moving, why are you not able to experience it? Gravity. You mean to say that when you go in a car, you don't have gravity? Okay, that is your next assignment, guys and girls. Okay, note it down. Think about it. Come to the next class. Okay, fine. So now, another important thing we explained in the last class, right? The sizes of Mercury and Venus, why it looks. Okay, so somebody has answered, we are experiencing the movement, right, through day and night. But Suman, you tell me, if we are going at 30 kilometers per second in a car, won't you feel a heavy wind? Earth spins steadily and moves at a constant rate in orbit. Okay, think about all those things. That's your assignment for this class. I'll just come to that. Okay, I'll just finish this slide and with that we'll conclude today. That's your assignment. Think about it. So sizes of Mercury and Venus we just told in the last class. Okay, and then came after Copernicus, one of the most famous scientists of all era, and probably whom many people call as the real scientist. Okay, the real first scientist. Okay, so this gentleman called Galileo, he felt like, yes, whatever Copernicus has told is right. But Copernicus did not get much time during his time to propagate his ideas. So Galileo, you have any idea who invented telescope? It's not Galileo. No. It's not Galileo. Okay, you have to find out. Okay, so it's another gentleman. So Galileo made a very improved version of telescope, and he's the person who contributed maximum with telescope. So he came with an improved. Come again? Yeah.
Hans Lippershey.
Yeah, Hans Lippershey. Okay. Yeah, you can type it in the chat. Let others know it. Okay. So Galileo came with an improved telescope, and with that telescope, he found a lot of things. Okay. One thing he found out, which actually revolutionized the world, was he told there are 4 moons to Jupiter. Actually, that was a last nail on the coffin of geocentric universe. Okay. Why do you think so? He found out that there are 4 moons to Jupiter. Actually, Jupiter has more moons. So like our Earth moon, he told there are 4 moons. And that became a very important proof against geocentric universe. Why do you think so? Anyone? Why is it that important? Why was that invention important? You are not able to see that using your naked eyes. And when he looked from telescope only, he found out. Anyone? With this slide we'll close. Anyone want to attempt? Okay, fine. So the predominant thought process at that time was that Earth is divine. Everything rotates Earth, including sun. So when he found out was there were other celestial objects which are rotating and other planets. Then the dominance of Earth goes away. Which means that there can be planet, there can be other celestial object. That's the word we use, okay? Celestial and terrestrial. Terrestrial means whatever we can see in our terrain. Celestial means anything in the sky and what we call as space, okay? So this was a solid proof, and there was another solid proof, okay? Which I will just show you. See, this was the Copernicus model, like what we know now. Sun is at the center. Earth is rotating. The previous model was Earth was at the center. Now, actually, if Earth was at the center, you can actually see only one side of Venus. The previous model, geocentric model, if Earth was at the center, if Earth is here, Venus is rotating the Earth, we can see only one part of Venus because this is rotating. Every time when you see, you look at only one side of Venus. But Galileo found out from Earth, when you look from this position, you can see this part of the Venus, and when Venus comes here, you see other part of the Venus. So when Venus rotates like this, it is not that Earth is stationary, Earth is also rotating, but then there could be times when Earth and Venus are on two opposite sides. So you can see the entire faces of Venus, and he could see that when he started looking at it from his telescope. And that is possible. That is possible only if Earth is rotating the sun. So these were some concluding proofs. Galileo had to pay a very heavy price for that. He underwent prosecution, and the faith-based systems during that time could not allow somebody telling that Earth is not the center of the universe. So he was prosecuted, and he was put under house arrest, and remaining part of his life he underwent house arrest. And at that time he was actually living near a sea, and he used to go for that walk, and he conducted lots of experiments during that period, which has actually laid the foundations of modern science. We will cover that in next class. Thank you. You can ask questions if you have anything. Okay, question. Why does objects with different masses fall together? Yeah. So we asked this question in the last class, right? Okay, so let us start that. So we asked this question in the last class. The question was, why, if you put two objects, one small object and another big object, let us assume this is 1 kg, this is 100 kg. If you put this down together at the same time, we told that, like, okay, somebody told the heavier one will fall first, but then both actually will fall at the same time. Okay. So now the question he is asking is why. So now if you know, so the gravitational force, as you know, has a component of this mass, right? You would have studied the gravitational force is the gravitational constant into mass of Earth into, let us assume mass of this object is small m, right? Divided by r square of the distance between them. This you have studied. This is the gravitational force. So in this, what is the small m? Small m is this weight of this one, right? This is also smaller. Let us assume this is 1 kg, this is 100 kg. Okay. So now what will happen? If this is 1 kg and if this is this one is 100 kg, what will happen? The gravitational force of, in the case of this one, G is constant. M is mass of Earth, again constant. R is distance between Earth and this one. Again, for both of them it is same. But the small m is small for this. So that means the gravitational force on this 100 kg mass would be 100 times that of this, because of this m is here. This weight is 100 times, gravitational force will be 100 times. So what has to happen? Ideally, this should fall 100 times faster. That is what should happen. Okay. So now, there the next thing comes. How does motion happen? So that is why I told, whatever Aristotle told, there is a problem. Okay. Now, let us assume these are stationary. We are just dropping it. Or let us assume this is coming from a height at some distance. Whatever be the case, what decides the motion of this one? The motion of this is decided by what is the force applied on this, and we have studied an equation for what is that acceleration called F is equal to m into a. You studied this. Okay. What does this mean? This means that a is equal to F divided by m. How do you interpret this? You have to interpret this. If there is an object of 100 kilogram mass, if a force is applied on this, force is the gravitational force. This will have an acceleration equal to force divided by mass. Same for this. Okay. So the force, let us assume the force in the case of this one is 1 Newton. Let us just assume. And the force here would be 100 Newton. If you are assuming this is 1 Newton, this would be 100 Newton, because the gravitational force will be more because m is here. Okay. What about the acceleration? So if you see the acceleration in this case is equal to, if this force is 1 Newton divided by the weight is 1, mass is 1, is equal to 1. Okay. What about the acceleration in this one? So in this one's case, acceleration is equal to force is 100 Newton divided by mass is also 100. Again, it is 1. So what happens? The increase in force is happening because of the increase in mass gets neutralized because this acceleration equation m is coming in the denominator. If you look at it in an analytical point of view, for a object with a higher mass, gravitational pull will be more. But then we all know that if you push, let us assume there is a 1 kg ball and a 100 kg ball. If you push both with the same force, obviously the 100 kg one will move lesser. The 1 kg ball will move faster. So which means if in any object, if the mass is higher, the acceleration will be lesser. The speed it will attain will be lesser. That is why if you have a truck which is very heavy, you need a higher capacity engine. And if you need a cycle, to push the cycle, you need only lesser force. Okay. So that acceleration is higher if the mass is lesser, but then the force is also less if the mass is lesser. And both this gets cancelled each other. That is why both these fall together.